This update for September 7, 2022, day 196 of the war, end of the date update. I'm gonna start actually today with a little bit of economic update and what's going on. As we mentioned before, starting about months ago or so, there is economic paralysis or economic heart attack that's spreading through Europe, through European industry, and this is another sort of proof and map of what's being stopped. This is steel plants that being affected by high energy prices and natural gas prices. As you can see, the most affected company is ArcelorMittal. So, but regardless, this is as you can see, this will trickle down through supply chain, and will sort of turn into shortage of steel, and then it will affect, for example, car industry and so on. So this is as there is no policy change, essential policy change in Europe, things are getting worse. And as we mentioned before, there is so far no light at the end of the tunnel in Europe. So, and in addition, we have some information on food security situation, food supply. Looks like the Canadian stocks of grains are down 38% relative to where they were a year ago this time. So again, we see that, and Canada is one of the biggest exporter of wheat and all of the grains. So there's again another major sort of problem brewing in terms of another supplier doesn't have enough. There's also reports that yields in the US are down significantly. So, so you can see the situation is really deteriorating further. And as the situation in Ukraine and Russia becoming more and more economically unfavorable for the farmers, and some farmers is really not to extent it's just too generic of a name, because in Ukraine and Russia this is kind of like industrial operations that run by companies. So in a way, it's almost like large companies running some of those operations. But nevertheless, as they don't have an economic incentive to produce, they will reduce investment, because they need to invest for the next year, and this is about probably in a month's time or less even, when they will need to start planting seeds for winter crops for the next year. And given this whole situation, most of them probably will opt out from investing money into the seeds and planting, and just will try to do bare minimum. Again, so if the way this looks, and unless there are drastic changes in relatively soon, we probably will see pretty acute food shortages starting probably sometime from spring of the next year. Now let's move to the military update. As many viewers are aware, I posted update earlier today as things were developing to just kind of provide more timely update or relative to what's going on in not even sure how to call this area. I guess well, wouldn't even probably right way to call it Balakliya, but let's say this Seversky Donetsk front line, or I'm not sure. Your ideas are welcome, basically, how you want to call it. But we will actually, I would like to look at the whole big picture situation right now. So from the Russian perspective. So first of all, Russian command is facing two crises at the same time. And while Kherson was pretty bad, it was somewhat to extent, I'd say, slowed down. It's still sort of like disaster in development, but it wasn't sort of quick disaster that's going to happen in a day or two or five or over a week. As we estimate, it's probably going to take another month before Russian troops will be forced to evacuate Kherson bridgehead. The crisis here near Balakliya and more related actually Kupyansk and Izyum, that's probably a better way to describe it, is developing pretty quickly. And we will, if things will go the way they go, we will see crisis in a day or two, where Russian troops will be in an extremely difficult position. So this will again goes back to discussion we had probably like 2 months ago, or even more, or 3 months ago, where it's very clear there is not enough Russian troops on the front line, and specifically infantry. And Russia is facing Russian leadership, and more so political leadership, not military leadership, because we're pretty sure that they realize the situation, but they limited by the political situation, political leadership. But they facing sort of critical point where they either need to double down and do some kind of mobilization, or they will need to seek negotiation and sort of peace. And the problem was in terms of peace. So peace part of it is that really means that Russia needs to return all of the Ukrainian territories, including Crimea. And that will be probably very humiliating. That may destabilize internal power structure in Russia. So that option probably is unacceptable for Russian political leadership, at least for now, until things get even more worse. So the remaining is doubling down. Maybe temporarily what Russian side can do is to attack the bridges across Dnipro River and destroy those bridges basically en masse everywhere, like, starting from, along entire river, right? So we don't know at this point if they have enough rockets, if they have capability to do that, all of these bridges. But that's really the only option that's available that we can think of, that's not mobilization, not using some tactical nuclear weapons, and not going into peace negotiations. That's pretty much the only option, because that will really create huge challenges for Ukraine, for Ukrainian command, Ukrainian economy. This will really kick it down to like new level of downward spiral for Ukraine, and that probably will stop the advance from the Balakliya area towards Kupyansk, and just generally the whole will hold everything there, and probably will even make it possible to capture the remaining part of the Donetsk region here. We still think that Russian troops, regardless, will lose Kherson bridgehead no matter what. This is, as we said here, writing is on the wall. They cannot do anything unless literally they use nuclear weapons. So this is the moment where they need the Russian sort of leadership. They need to do something, because otherwise, if they continue sort of put head into the ground, things will simply, the sort of objective reality will take care of everything, and things will simply start to fall apart, which looks like they are already near Balakliya, where there is a serious crisis, where it looks like is disorderly, disorganized retreat by Russian troops there. And we'll discuss more in detail what's going on there once we get to that area of the conversation. So this is from a sort of big picture strategic situation, what's going on. From Ukrainian perspective, the situation is okay for now. It's as long as Ukraine is receiving those HIMARS rockets, this will continue, and this there is no problem. From the long-term perspective, Ukraine has a big problem, because the way it fights is super inefficient, maybe with exception of this attack near Balakliya, and it simply cannot afford to lose as many people as it has been losing. Again, until this Balakliya attack, which definitely much better carried out, much better organized, and things are done in many ways much more intelligently. So let's actually now start like our walkthrough in a clockwise fashion, starting from the very north. As always, there is exchange of all sorts of fire along the state border here in Chernihiv, Sumy, and partially Kharkiv region. Situation east of Kharkiv is more or less stable. Some small Russian pressure, but as we mentioned many times before, this is attacks that like less than company size. This is just really trying to preserve the buffer here. So now let's actually move to this Balakliya / Izyum / Kupyansk area, and actually let's actually look before we jump there. What this attack is really similar to is to German defeat in Stalingrad in November of 1942. So the map here, the whole point of this map here is to show that what happened at that time is that German command pulled all of its most capable forces and units into Stalingrad to really finally squeeze Soviet troops here. As you can see, there are tiny bridgeheads were there, and everything was glued to it, and there was a lot of effort, a lot of casualties sustained in trying to destroy this 3 or whatever number of these bridgeheads that was there. So everything, so the flanks were sort of super like paper thin. And what they did, as they needed more and more sort of German regular troops, those troops were pulled from these flanks here and here, and those flanks were basically filled with low quality troops. As you can see, most of here it's Romanian, some Italian. There were also Hungarian troops there. Here, as you can see in the southern area, Romanian. So it kind of created this kind of like iceberg. That's the tip of the iceberg is extremely strong and extremely sharp, and have strong penetration power. But the base of the iceberg is super weak, super paper thin, and this is what Soviet command exploited at that time. As you can see, they literally hit. They hit where at the sections that were defended by, in this case, mostly Romanian army. But then later they launched offensive against Italian, and the whole front line started crumbling, and also Hungarian. But initial phase was they hit this paper thin flanks. Manned by Romanian troops, and they started retreating. And here you have this encirclement here. And the even bigger problem is that German command basically used up all of their reserves trying to get this final push in Stalingrad. So they did not have any kind of like strong forces that were immediately available for the relief of the encircled troops, right? It took them about, say, 15 days or so to assemble something and throw into attack. So that was another problem, that there was basically Soviet troops hit into emptiness, and they were so empty that they couldn't even scramble anything in a quick way. And this is so this is now, this background. And so that's actually, it's very similar situation. Obviously geographically looks different, but the whole idea is similar. So Russian command pulled all of its most capable troops and created the same kind of like tip of the iceberg here on the Izyum bridgehead. Many of those troops were actually used up there, so they were in weakened condition as well. The same actually was true for the German troops in Stalingrad. They were sort of, shadowed themselves. Nevertheless, they were still very, battle hardened and still capable troops. but obviously in smaller numbers. So the same is going on here. So this is tip of the iceberg. This is the flank of it, right? Starting from Saltiv all the way to Kamyshevacha here, right? So this is the flank, and this is another flank here. This is again strong Russian troops. This is this North Donbass front line here. So there are like two flanks. Ukrainian command did not touch this flank because, as you can imagine, obviously there are strong Russian troops here. It's easier to sort of counterattack. Basically, there's no opportunity here. So that's a difference from the Soviet attack and encirclement in Stalingrad. That here the flank that was used was here, sort of like east of Balakliya, and the attack was essentially directed towards Kupyansk, which is large logistical hub to supply all of this group in Izyum, right? If this falls, this is going to be disorderly collapse here. Pretty sure that some of the Russian troops will escape. There is no question about it. There are sort of kind of like bridges. There's a bridge here in over a Skill River. There is another one here. There's another one here. So some of them will be destroyed by HIMARS rocket systems in the process, especially this one near Borova and probably this one, because this is artificial lake here, so it's not that easy to cross. So if let's say Ukrainian troops approach Kupyansk, or even they close, so they don't even need to really capture. This is, as long as they are within, let's say, 10 kilometers of Kupyansk, that's good enough to completely paralyze this thing. And then, obviously the supply is paralyzed, and this is relatively large number of troops, and the door here, basically exit door, is too small for all of this flow of troops to exit sort of successfully. So some of them will sort of get lost here, and more so what will happen is that maybe infantry somehow will be able to escape, or let's say most of it, majority of it, let's say 80%, but pretty much all of the heavy equipment will be abandoned, specifically cannons, tanks, or all of that heavy, the most valuable equipment will be abandoned here, because this is exactly what happened here in this small bridgehead in near north of Husarivka, because Ukrainian troops didn't really attack this bridgehead. This literally, the Russian troops fled on themselves, leaving all of the heavy equipment, the 152 millimeter howitzers, all of that was literally left there, was literally everything. So this is something may happen here, and this exit door is here over Oskil River for now is open, and so hopefully this explains a little bit of what's going on and similarity, and maybe the sort of I want to highlight the similarity is that all of this flank was basically manned with screening troops, with third-rated troops, mostly was those conscripts from Luhansk and Donetsk region, then militarized police. Turns out that a lot of that military police doesn't even have anti-tank weapons, basically those man-held missiles. A lot of them actually don't even know how to use automatic grenade launchers. So there's also like a lack of skills. So basically they truly militarized police. So this is this paper thin flank that was there, and where Ukrainian command hit, and Ukrainian troops actually moving mostly towards Kupyansk, because a lot of sort of Russian sources say, Balakliya is still being held by Russian troops, which is probably true, but the whole point is actually not Balakliya. Balakliya is essentially nothing here. The whole point is really Kupyansk, and is this logistical center to supply Izyum, Russian Izyum group here. And because that's the biggest prize here. To destroy this really puts Russian army out of action essentially. And we cannot say the war is over, but for the most part, Russian troops probably will need to retreat from Ukraine. Maybe they will sort of stay in Crimea and will try to defend it, but for the most part, it will be lost what was gained since February 24, if this succeeds here. Because the next point from which Russian troops can supply themselves on this Izyum is Starobilsk, this one here. So as you can see, this is much longer sort of road, and because it needs to go back to sort of Russia, sort of you need to, like, basically it's much longer logistical leg, which will require more trucks, more everything essentially. And that's going to be much more expensive. So this is the kind of like high level what's going on here. Also very interesting to observe where Russian, inside of this Russian community, they start blaming this General A or General B or C, whatever, basically looking for scapegoats. But the problem is the same that German command was facing, where they need to attack, they need troops, but they don't get those troops. They don't get new reserves, and the losses are high. So what they decided to do, okay, we constrain politically the same way that we cannot get more troops, so we're gonna pull it from the flanks and try to still maintain this strong tip of the iceberg. This is exactly what happened here, is that Russian command had to do it because they don't have enough troops. And this is, again, going back the same situation, same setup, where it all goes back to political leadership, where there is clearly need for more troops, more people, and they don't get those people. And the same was exactly in German army, where German leadership didn't want to mobilize as many sort of resources out of the economy. So this is exactly a similar situation here. Now let's actually look at a little bit more from more sort of tactical and immediate perspective what's happening here. So we have a little bit more clarity of Ukrainian attacking forces. We definitely know that 92nd Brigade is attacking. There is also, looks like, with very high probability that 25th and 80th Brigades are attacking. So this is the main attacking force here, essentially. There could be other brigades joining later, because it's very clear that Ukrainian command will need more resources to sort of finish the objective. And objective is Kupyansk, right? So objective is not Balakliya. This is actually totally not objective, and that for that reason probably Ukrainian troops are not assaulting Balakliya. They essentially blocked it. From my understanding, the northern part, this from the western, from south, the only sort of escape route is towards the southeast here, towards Savinci. And even there we hear that the reports that this is also being cut off. So this situation here is somewhat still unclear. But the whole point is not to liberate Balakliya, but actually hit here towards Kupyansk. And so there are some sort of relatively intelligent moves that are being done by Ukrainian command here, where what they do, they try not to assault and capture strongholds. So like Balakliya is one good example. Then similar situation is happening in Shevchenkove. So Russian command managed to scramble something, we don't even know what it is, and they threw them at Shevchenkove to stem sort of the tide of advancing Ukrainian forces. So what happened is Ukrainian forces essentially blocked Shevchenkove and started bypassing it and started moving east. So they somewhere, we don't know exactly where, they somewhere east of Shevchenkove, not terribly far away, because they spent time sort of blocking it and figuring out bypasses. But essentially this is what's happening, and this is absolutely the right move. There's no need to sort of capture this Shevchenkove. The whole point is to quickly move as soon as possible to Kupyansk. Because so far it doesn't look like Russian command has many reserves. This was the only something that they scrambled here to throw in Shevchenkove. They don't even have enough reserves to relieve their troops in Balakliya, which are still holding on there, thinking that they are basically, doing great job defending it, while they actually basically um, could be sitting in a much larger pocket very soon. So this is what's going on. And then there was some move towards southeast along the road towards Izyum, but this one is, in our opinion, is more like a move to protect the flanks of this group that's going through Shevchenkove, and it's directed towards Kupyansk. There is no need to actually even go much south. This is not the goal. The objective is here, and once this is cut off, this really creates like domino effect. And as we discussed, the only escape routes is here, Senkova, then this near Borova here, and then there is small bridge near this village Askil here. We don't even know if those bridges are still operational, because when Ukrainian troops were retreating, they probably blew up some of them. We don't have, and we don't know if Russian troops actually managed to repair them. But regardless, this will be a big bottleneck to escape, because the only escape route for these Russian troops here is through Izyum, and then the closest one through Askil, and basically back here. This one probably destroyed, and also, or it will be destroyed by HIMARS system here and here. So that's what we mean is the only realistic escape route is here and near Askil, because the river here, it's much shallower, this Askil river, because it's smaller river than Seversky Donetsk, and Seversky Donetsk by itself is not really deep and wide river in the first place. The only negative, it's starting to be cold, so getting across the cold river will create another challenges. And as we said, this is too small of a door, too small of an exit for the all of the troops to be able to escape. So this is the situation. The only sort of potentially negative scenario for Ukrainian troops would be if they don't manage to if they get stopped somewhere, let's say this Volodska Balakliya here, and then this supply area functions, and Russian troops manage to sort of basically, they probably will need to leave this bridgehead, but they can basically create the front line facing north, and then they can sort of fight there and slowly kind of like move back here. That's the sort of potential here. Also, another one is that Russian command will find some reserves that are fresh, and they have some kind of like aces that they can throw on the battlefield. In that case, it's very dangerous for Ukrainian troops situation, because this can easily turn into potential disaster for Ukrainian troops if they are counterattacked in a skillful way and by strong troops, fresh troops. They themselves can become trapped in this whole area. So far everything is going in the direction of sort of favorable direction for Ukrainian troops. There were right moves in terms of like right place to hit, because the Ukrainian troops hit essentially empty area, emptiness, where Russian command doesn't have much anything. So they don't really. That's why we're still seeing this like second day, and there is nothing, no meaningful reserves, no meaningful counterattacks, no nothing. This is just essentially forward move of Ukrainian troops, and pretty quick one. So remains to be seen, but so far it looks pretty dangerous for the Russian side. As we mentioned, Ukrainian troops captured Lieutenant Colonel, There are POWs, and this really means that there is quite a bit of disorganization, borderline panic on the Russian side. So remains to be seen if they manage to sort of regain control of themselves. But so far, chances are not great. So let's actually move to Izyum bridgehead. Things here sort of more or less stable, nothing really major. Some small scale attack near this Dolina Krasnopilya, which is probably just sort of painting picture attack, nothing really major going on there. Now let's move to North Donbass section of the front line. Things here are like a broken record, nothing really changes. Frontal attacks in Soledar, in Bakhmut, that don't lead to anywhere. Then also Vesela Dolina, Zaitsevo, so all typical areas. Russian troops, after capture of Kadema, sort of regrouping, sort of planning, kind of getting some sort of short break, but essentially this is there is no big movement, but nothing. There's no large attacks here. Also, this persistent attack from this Mayorsky here towards northwest, probably to create flanking opportunity in Bakhmut here. Now let's move south. Let's see what's going on here on this central section of the Donbass front line. Again, the same kind of story, the same attacks out of this Piski, and essentially what Russian troops doing here, they destroying with the help of artillery Ukrainian defensive positions here, softening them between Opatne, basically starting from this road that leads to Avdiivka from Spartak, from this village. So all of this towards Vodene, it's essentially because there were pretty strong defensive engineer positions by Ukrainian troops, so they sort of slowly eroding them, slowly destroying with the help of artillery. And we're pretty sure once they soften them enough, they will try to renew their attacks in sort of large scale. Something similar is going on here near between Pervomaisk and Piski. Russian troops are still sort of fighting on this outskirts of Pervomaisk, and Nevitsk has actually been relatively quiet past several days. So as you can see, there's no essentially movement. This is from August 21. So for whatever, probably 17 days or so, there's essentially no advances here. Now let's look at Zaporizhia front line. Things here relatively quiet today. No big movements here. Now let's move finally to Kherson bridgehead. At the high level, Ukrainian command continues attacks using HIMARS. So all of the bridges are at this point not usable. They're not fully destroyed, but they are in condition where they are not usable. Russian troops are trying to use ferries, which we mentioned many times. The throughput is too little. It's like a bottleneck, essentially creating artificial bottleneck. And even then, there are problems. There was video floating around clearly showing that even those ferries are being destroyed and attacked by Ukrainian sort of troops, by this HIMARS system. So even that is being essentially destroyed. So again, this situation of the Russian troops on the Kherson bridgehead is I would say disastrous, but it's gonna be sort of like drawn out disaster that will be happening over next, let's say, 30 days, because it's like almost like you're slowly cutting off the flow of blood and to, let's say, your hand, and eventually the hand will be not functioning. So this is what's essentially going on here at the high level on Kherson bridgehead. At the same time, and I just want to mention and compare and contrast situation near Balakliya and here in Kherson bridgehead. So the difference here is that Ukrainian troops attacked one of the more motivated Russian troops, which is airborne units, and they having sort of hard time advancing. They still do, but they having hard time advancing, and the casualties are high. But I mean, in general, during attack, offensive, you have high level of casualties, which is this is how it is, right? Versus if we compare attack here out of Balakliya area, casualties are extremely low to almost non-existent. So which again goes back to the idea that the area of attack was skillfully picked, and so it also leads to extremely low casualties. So far, Ukrainian troops essentially not losing anything there, and so they continued. So the fighting power, this kind of like a snowball, is not getting smaller, and it can continue sort of moving forward and sort of hit sort of next areas with the same strengths. Versus here on Kherson bridgehead, essentially Ukrainian brigades sort of ran out of steam. This doesn't mean that this whole offensive stopped. No, it's just going to be very slow motion train wreck for Russian troops. Actually, let's move here. So as you can see, Ukrainian troops managed to build this bridgehead here, and they will simply, once they get sort of refreshed, probably will take another 5 days a week. They will continue putting pressure on Russian troops out of this area. This is obviously no-brainer. At the same time, they still trying to put pressure here in the north. The situation here on their sort of western section of it is more or less stable, and it sort of makes sense because these troops here are even more sort of trapped. We really need to get to this Novokakhovka, and the pontoon bridges are functioning like in this area, basically. So this is more sort of supplying this group as opposed to this one. So so this one is sort of like will be taken care of by actually destroying this group of this Russian group. But let's just quickly look what's going on here. So this is this bridgehead that we have here, essentially this one, around, let's say, village Stukhay Stavok. Ukrainian troops still holding on. Russian troops just simply don't have enough artillery ammunition, don't have enough artillery to basically destroy this bridgehead at this point. And they definitely don't have enough infantry. They never had it in the first place. So what they were relying is artillery, and now that's sort of being taken away from them. Let's actually look at the situation in the north. Since here, Ukrainian troops continue slowly moving. So there are reports that they captured this village Novovoznesenske here. So little by little, it's like, as we said, death by 1,000 cuts. They will be slowly pushing out Russian troops. But as we mentioned before, there is no decisive kind of like penetration, no decisive momentum that was created on Kherson bridgehead relative, as opposed to Balakliya situation, where this very clear breach, deep penetration, deep breach of Russian defensive positions, and really sort of your sort of traditional offensive that potentially could lead to very big results. That's it for the day. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.